I just want to thank everyone for showing up. A lot of familiar faces in the audience, so thank you to all of the supporters from the freedom movement, the Stanley Parkers and all of the local liberation people. Welcome also to, welcome Russell, hi, good to see you there, thanks for coming. And thanks also to those of you who come from Cressbrook. We have asked John outside to come in and join the meeting. So no doubt those who are here from Cressbrook will want to have a bit of a lively debate, shall we say, and all voices are welcome, because ultimately this meeting is about freedom. It's about our individual freedom to find our voices, to stand in our sovereign power, and to make our own choices. And I want to pay tribute to my partner Dean, who Dean is a farmer, but he also teaches common law. And he's taught me an awful lot about common law principles, which are very, very simple, which is simply to cause no harm, injury or loss to your fellow man or woman. And we are all born with unlimited rights under God's eyes. We all deserve to be here. We all have a right to be here. We all have the right to free speech, to freedom of choices. And the only limit to our rights is when we impinge on someone else's rights. Now, of course, when a dispute happens under common law, in our current society, there's a tendency to act as judge, jury, and executioner. But in common law principles, the way that justice is done is via trial by jury, which is basically to gather 12 independent men and women who hear all the evidence and decide whether a person is guilty or not guilty. And we are all innocent until proven guilty. And I want to mention this because this is our direct route to the power of the people, without even having to get elected for Parliament, or the influence that we have. There's very few people know this, that a jury can nullify any legislation. So say, for example, there's an interesting anecdote, and I'll mention it, of a guy who during the lockdown, he claimed he thought he was in tier 3 when he was in tier 4, and he sold some mince pies. And he got arrested and charged for selling mince pies in a lockdown in a tier 3 zone, or whatever the rule was at the time. And about a week or two ago, he was put in prison. He was put in prison for a year. He was sentenced to a year in prison for selling mince pies. Now, had he understood common law and required a trial by jury, even though there had been CCTV footage of him selling the mince pies, and he was absolutely guilty of selling the mince pies, nonetheless, the jury could have nullified that legislation and said, that is ridiculous. We are not going to find someone guilty for selling mince pies. The legislation was at fault. And so the power of the people is actually rooted in common law. So I want to thank Dean for opening my eyes to common law. So that's something that I feel very passionate about. Obviously, thank you to Jonathan for coming. Jonathan's going to do a more structured speech in a second about the Freedom Alliance, but I just wanted to say why I answered the clarion call, because the Freedom Alliance put out a clarion call, said anyone who wants to stand as an MP, please put yourself forward, because just to get this movement going. And I answered the clarion call, had a conversation with Jonathan, and here I am. Now, under this current system of democracy, first past the post, the chances of me being elected as an MP are probably minuscule. So why am I doing it? Well, for me, it's an opportunity to speak out, another opportunity to speak out and to patent interrupt the programme which is running. And it's so important that we have public meetings, because so much communication is done by social media and through online platforms where there's no heart and soul. And, you know, even if you're going to have a lively debate, it's much better to do it in person, because you get the whole of the energy and the passion and the communication. And in a group of people like this, it's far easier to get to that place of compassion and understanding and to transcend conflict. Whereas online, and I know that I use online a lot, and it's amazing in many respects to building a tribe and to allowing everyone to have a voice. But increasingly, the more that I do, the more I treasure stand in the parks and meetings and people actually coming together, human to human, and communicating the good old-fashioned way. So I just wanted to finish by just talking a little bit. I mentioned it in the leaflet, which many of you may have got through your door, about the level to which communication is now controlled. And I feel it's very important for us all to be aware that all of the mainstream newspapers, magazines, television channels, communications networks are all in either wholly or in part funded by big corporations who are affiliated to the World Economic Forum. And what that means is most of the people are consuming communication which is very tailored, and it only contains one side of the story. So unless you're on channels like Telegram, or unless you're actually at places like Stand in the Park, if you're only consuming mainstream media, you're only getting what they want you to know. Very important to realise that. Now, the thing that triggered my suspicion of everything that unfolded during COVID was when a friend of mine, a very close friend who I absolutely trusted, she sent me the minutes of a SAGE meeting, which is the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, which was formed around COVID. And these minutes of the meeting, I said, this must be fake. This must be fake. And she said, no, this is the real thing, Rachel. Be aware. And it was written by behavioural psychologists about how, and the techniques and tricks that they could use to persuade the people to comply with all of the rules and the regulations and the mandates and the lockdowns. So things like keeping other people safe. You need to do this to keep someone else safe. Otherwise grandma won't be safe. And anyway, the level of PSYOP and propaganda is military grade. So we have to be aware that government is mind control. These psychological techniques are extremely powerful, and I feel that one of my purposes, roles in this, is to help to pattern interrupt those mind control programs. And there's a very eminent expert on this, Matthias Desmet, and he wrote about mass formation psychosis. And every regime, every controlling regime throughout history that has wanted to try to bulldoze through a program, like the Nazis, for example, they will use the same mass formation psychosis. They will identify an enemy. They will make that enemy faceless. And they will blame that enemy. And they will create division, divide and conquer, and use propaganda to make that enemy the persecutor and everyone is the victim to it. So we're going to have a public debate in a second, so we will come to this.
What you said about a man getting convicted for selling his pies is wholly true. He got convicted for perverting the course of justice because he tried to delete evidence. And he got 6 months, not a year. Okay,
so we'll come on to questions later if we may, because this is going to be a public debate, but if we could just allow the talks to create the space to have the public debate, and we will come to you. Sorry, what was your name again?
Pattern Interrupter.
Oh, Pattern Interrupter. Okay, so So just going back to Matthias Desmet, and he talks about this, this way of influencing people to create this enemy and to push through programs and to get everyone to comply. The thing that he said, the key thing that he said that makes all the difference to stop that happening is people questioning and questioning and questioning and speaking out and questioning. Because if everyone it seems to be in agreement, then it's much easier to get compliance. It only takes one or two people to speak out for people to go, actually, I think they might have a point. And then that is the pattern interrupt which stops conflict, ultimately, and war happening, and division and war within communities. So just being aware of mass formation psychosis is I believe, really key. So there are a number of reasons why I'm standing here, and just to assure everyone that this isn't my new political career, that is my new latest ego trip, money-making political career, because, as I say, the chances of me actually getting into the Houses of Parliament, I suspect are very slim. But Dean always says to me, you may well be surprised. So I don't know how I'd feel about being in Westminster, having watched today's budget speech. But perhaps we can get on to talking about mainstream politics a bit later on in the debate. There's lots I could say, but I will end it there and hand over to Jonathan, who's going to talk a bit about the Freedom Alliance.
Thank you. Okay, everybody can hear me okay at the back? Yeah? Great, brilliant. Thanks, Rachel. I'll try and do a slightly more structured speech. I'm not sure if that's what it is or not. I'm Jonathan Tilt. I have the somewhat dubious honour of being the leader of the Freedom Alliance political party, a political party set up by non-politicians in the middle of 2020 to try and provide some mechanism for pattern interrupting, providing opposition to the state narrative that was in full flow during COVID. In terms of whether we want to be politicians, we don't, and in terms of if we were to get into Westminster, our only purpose really would be to close the wretched place down. That's where we are coming at this from. But we are the essential essence is one of trying to use the system to defeat the system, which is not to diminish the work of those that are working outside the system to try and defeat the system, but the two go hand in my view, and we'll focus on that, and the people can focus on the external side. We're climbing a mountain here, there's various paths at the side of it, and we don't know which path is going to work, so let's try them all. I mean, I'm assuming the bulk of the people in the room are from what we would sort of term the resistance liberation movement. Because that's what I'm about. I'm trying to organise the people that are on our side to try and have some sort of organised pushback. I get into the debates with those that are on the side and in the middle during election time. But my main focus is in what we can do, the 15-20% that we've got on our side, what we can do to provide pushback. And we've done well, I think. I think we've done really well, actually. When this thing was launched on us, I mean, I wasn't expecting this. I wouldn't be someone that would have termed myself as roughly awake and loosely awake. But I wasn't expecting this to kick off in 2020, and most of the people I know weren't expecting to kick off in 2020. We got organised, we developed, is this thing doing any good? Or just, okay. we got organised, we built up these networks, largely on social media, and social media did have its role at that point. I personally think we've got to break out of social media and do far more of this now and far more using elections. But we built these networks, we've built these friendships, and there are vast communities across the country now that's connected one by one and can be called to action. And we led the line on the mass non-compliance, which is what has stalled them and driven them into a stalemate. The ridiculous North Korean clapping we had at the start. The minute 15% of the population stopped doing that, and I think 15, there's one or two people who have heard me talk about 15% before, but I think 15% is an absolutely vital figure in this. The minute 15% stopped clapping, they stopped it. It's okay, you've done it for 10 weeks now, you don't need to do it. The masks was on and off, and every time their AI systems were telling them that 15% or thereabouts of people were not wearing them in the supermarkets, okay, we don't need to do masks anymore, the virus has magically gone away for a few weeks. And obviously with the state injections, same thing. We stood the line. It depends which set of figures you use, but I tend to rely on the ONS vaccine surveillance report, and that shows 15% of the population didn't have any of the state injections that have been dressed up as vaccines. So that's when they pushed it. They stopped with the progress onto the vaccine passports, and in particular the 8% in the NHS who stood back. I mean, we do know the figure of NHS employees was 82,000 who were threatened with losing their livelihood and still said, no, we're not having it, you can take the job off me. And I think they thought, what the hell do we do now at that point? Where do we go from here? Because we can take the livelihood away and they still won't have it. So that mass non-compliance works, and it's worked for us as a resistance movement. But as Rachel has said many times, we're now moving into the sort of liberation phase. We've been like that, they've been coming at us, and we've stood our ground, and we've stood our ground really well. But we now need to go onto the front foot and push back. And we're in this sort of stalemate situation where, I mean, they thought, and they're arrogant. These people at the World Economic Forum, the Davos gangsters are arrogant. They thought they'd do the fake virus leading to a fake vaccine. They'd have digital ID in, and then we'd have the social crediting and the digital money, and everything would be controlled, and it would happen within a couple of years. And we've stopped them halfway along that road, but they have not gone away. They absolutely have not gone away. And our biggest enemy at this point is complacency. And they can't go away, because they've used the system for controlling us over the last decades, centuries, some would even say millennia, and that system's been debt slavery, basically. They trap you in debt, you have to service that debt on your house, your car, your land, whatever it is. And to service that debt, you have to be within the system, and that's how they've controlled us. And it's we haven't really realised we've been slaves probably. So it's I think they're quite happy with that system. The trouble is the debt-based system only works if you forever increase the money supply. You keep printing more and more money all the time, and eventually that weight of money collapses under itself into hyperinflation. And that's where we're at now. They know that. They know their system's on its last legs. So they've got to replace it with something else, because they obviously still want to control us. They haven't given up on their desire to run the world. And what they're going for is obviously a system of digital control, digital passports, everything monitored by AI. You've got to be, the minute you say anything that's anti-state or it's a bit dubious, you get your bank account switched off, which we've already seen in Canada. And that's, I mean, we can debate about exactly the machinations of that, but that's where they're going. That's what they're aiming at. And for me, the fake virus was the first stage in that process, and they thought they'd get it in, and they didn't, but they haven't given up, would be my advice. And for me, there's no saviours coming. Nobody's going to come right across the hill and save us and say it's all over. And I would love that if that was the case, but that is not going to happen. We have got to do this ourselves, each one of us. As a political party, the 600 constituencies, if you exclude Northern Ireland, we need somebody in every single one doing it. And it's brilliant when people like Rachel come forward, but I need all of you to come forward as well. That's where we're at. We've got to make a stand. We've got to stand across the country and stand for freedom and truth. I've no desire to be a professional politician. I mean, I'm mid-50s. I've perfectly okay life working as an acupuncturist, used to be an accountant. 2019, I was reasonably happy and content with life. I've no desire to be a professional politician at all. And beyond that, I don't think anybody should be a professional politician. I think the whole system is corrupt. We don't need to send people down to London to make decisions. We don't need a big state that sits on top of us and oppresses us. We're quite happy and able to make our own decisions in our communities individually. The compulsion should be taken out of it, but it's not going to go away by itself. This stuff is not going to go away by itself. So essentially, I have a vision of a society, and it's difficult to articulate fully, but a much more, we're social animals. We will continue to work collectively. If people want to live as hermits, then they should be left alone to live as hermits, but we're not going to do that as a society. But the decisions we make collectively can be made locally, they can be made organically, they might be completely different in one town to the next town, that's absolutely fine. And there should be no compulsion around them, but that's not where we're at now. We've got a society that is controlled by the state, that isn't anything actually fundamentally wrong with the idea of a state, I think, other than the fact that it can be captured, and that's what's happened. The whole state infrastructure has been captured. People are dependent on it, 60, 70, maybe 80%, maybe even the whole population are already dependent on the state for their income. Because, I might think that, mine would like acupuncture practice, I'm independent, I'm private, I'm free from the state. But if every single person coming to me, and this is not far off the truth, is on benefits, or they work for the state, they work for the local council, or they work for a big corporation that is basically an extension of the state, and effectively I'm dependent on the state as well, aren't I? And that's the situation. I think you can make a case of saying every single one of us is effectively financially dependent on the state, and they've got us in that situation. We've got to get away from that and to build a society that is where people have genuine financial and personal independence, because then the state can't control them. And the Davos gangsters, they can capture the state. There's no point in capturing the state because it hasn't got any power. So yeah, that leads us on to a sort of slightly difficult situation. I don't want to be a politician. I don't think anybody should want to be a politician. So what the hell am I doing running a political party? Is where you might go to next, and it's the question I wake up most mornings and ask myself. I can promise you that. But essentially, it comes down to two things really. Elections give us a platform. We are able and allowed to get coverage. We're doing a by-election in Chester, parliamentary by-election in Chester next week. Today and tomorrow, 50,000 leaflets are going out through every door, every letterbox in Chester. And there's some examples up here for people at the end. But they're quite hard, isn't it? We can get away with saying things that we would never ever get media coverage for outside of elections. Our website gets a lot of visits, and we do create a little bit of media interest. So it gives us a platform, and that's an opportunity to pat and interrupt, as Rachel says. And I think in Freedom Alliance we do that quite powerfully. We're not given any coverage by the media, but when elections we do get a little bit of coverage, and that's our opportunity. But the bigger reason really is, the system isn't going to collapse itself. We are going to have to get inside it and take control. Take control not because we want to use it for our own ends, but take control to switch the thing off. That's what we need to do, and that's why we need to use elections. And it's there. It is absolutely there for the taking. This is their Achilles heel. Council elections, 30% of the population vote. Even general elections, it's maybe only 45–50%. That 50% that are not voting because there's nothing to vote for. And that's where we are. The bulk of the people, but the bulk of our 15–20% are in that 50%. If we can get that 15% to vote, then we can start to take council seats, and we can start to get people into Westminster to partner and interrupt there. Councils, we can do much more powerful things because, as an example, Derbyshire Dales Council, I think, has got 30-odd seats coming up for election in May. Now, the World Economic Forum often operates through councils. I don't know if people are aware of what's going on in Oxford at the minute, the zoning of the city. Yeah, in essence, Oxford is big, and Canterbury. I know less about the Canterbury situation. That's obviously they're going for the places where they're going to get the least pushback. But Oxford is being zoned into 7 zones. Leave your zone more than twice a week by car and you get £100 fine. That's what's happening. And they will do that. You're allowed to leave it by bike or foot. It's just this non-active travel, which is another wonderful term they've come up with. Non-active travel, you can't leave your zone. So if you think about I live in HD8 postcode, for example. If that's applied to me, I would not be allowed to leave the HD8 postcode more than twice a week, which makes many aspects of my life impossible, which is what they want, so that you become dependent on their universal basic income and the rest of it. And they do that through the council. That's nothing to do with central government. They're doing that through Oxford City Council. And they'll do, once they get traction there, if the people in Oxford don't stand up and they get traction there, they'll start pushing it out to the other cities, and then they'll come to the towns like this and the rural places as well. So that's coming, and their digital systems will enable them to enforce it. And that's why it's important to get seats on council, so that we can say, actually you're not doing that here because we don't agree with it. So we can stop the process. If you go back to the nonsense that was happening in 2020, the COVID marshals, the white lines on the pavements, all the rest of it, the ridiculous amounts of money that was spent by bankrupt councils on enforcing absurd regulations. It was done by councils and people in councils, and then 1 or 2 brave councils did stand up and try and stop it, but there weren't enough of them. There just weren't enough of them. So next time, when they come with the next fake pandemic, if we've got people saying Derbyshire Dales Council and say, hang on, you're not doing that, we're not voting for it, it does disrupt them. It's not necessarily mean that that itself is going to win the battle for us, but it does significantly put in, a spanner in the works, and that for me. And obviously you can extend that then to going to Westminster and trying to disrupt the whole, the passing of legislation in the first place. And unfortunately, that is what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to try and do that. We need your support, both as candidates, as canvassers, and definitely as voters, to help us do that. Small word. We often get, I don't know how politically up to speed people are, but we get a lot of comments about why don't you just merge with the other so-called freedom parties, Reform, UNCUT, Heritage, etc. And it's not to say that we don't have some sympathies with some of those, and probably not with heritage, because they're not, they're Christian fundamentalists. Their view of freedom isn't one that I would sign up to. But there's a fundamental difference. They want to replace the people, but keep the system. They want to keep the representative democracy. They just want it to be them rather than Labour and Conservative. And for a small period of time, that might be better, because they would perhaps not be captured at that point. But it's a system that's at fault. It's a system that leads to capture. It's, much as we might detest Hancock and Sunak and Starmer and whoever, it isn't actually their fault. It's the system that they're in that leads, focuses power in just a small number of hands and leads those people to be easily captured by the World Economic Forum. And that's so we want to get power, to switch the power off. The other so-called freedom parties want to get power, to use the power to implement their own agendas, which may or may not be any better than the agendas we're suffering under at the minute, but in time they will become corrupted and captured. I don't have any doubt about that. So that hopefully tells you what we're trying to do with Freedom Alliance. In terms of what Freedom Alliance is, it is, we hope, a genuine grassroots party. It was set up, as I said, by people in West Yorkshire who hadn't been involved in politics before and didn't particularly want to be involved in politics. I was involved in the sort of resistance movement right at the start in Yorkshire, all the ridiculous meeting in woods and secret knocks on doors and stuff, which just, even now it seems quite bizarre to think back to those times, but it was like that, and I'm sure everybody here, or lots of people here, were in that sort of environment. And we just built it out of that. We started to say, look, we thought, we were just thinking about Kirklees first and saying, look, there's going to be 20 council seats come up in Kirklees at some point. Wouldn't it be brilliant if we could stand somebody in every one and just try and get a few people into Kirklees Council? And Kirklees Council at that time, we've all got our little ridiculous anecdotes, but there's somebody from Kirklees here. In the centre of Huddersfield, they thought the people of Huddersfield didn't know what 2 metres was. So they had these billboards with 1.5 sheep to show them what 2 metres was. That's what Kirklees Council was spending council taxpayers' money on. We understand that you might not be able to know what 2 metres is, but if you just stay 1.5 sheep away from the person in front of you, you'll be doing the right thing. We'd have people in there, we could have stopped that. I mean, maybe it's a good idea to stop that because it's so absurd that it provides us with a useful little anecdote now. So Freedom Alliance, I think, and hopefully the other Freedom Alliance members in here, because there are a handful of people that have been candidates and will be candidates and know a little bit about Freedom Alliance, but it is a genuine party of the people, by the people, for the people. And it is to liberate the people. We are now becoming a liberation movement, not a resistance movement. We've gone from them, they're coming at us, and we need to get organised and go at them now, and elections is one of their weak points, I genuinely believe. But that's to come, not to come back to what I said at the start. It's not to diminish everything else. The common law trial by jury thing for me is massive. I've only recently woken up to that in the last few months, and that's an incredibly powerful tool. But the two can work in conjunction. We can use the platform we get as a political party. We can stick that on our next election leaflet. Say, look, do you know what trial by jury actually means? And we can stick that through 50,000 letterboxes in wherever the next by-election is. So the two can come together and work together extremely well. And one may be successful, the other one may not be successful. We don't know yet what's going to work, so we have to try everything. But I think they've got a real problem with elections. I think if we could get a bit of a bandwagon going, we could really upset the apple cart. That may, they're a cornered animal at the minute. They're not going to give up their power very easily. So the harder it gets for them, the more severe and restrictive they're going to be. They've got the power, they've got the printing press to create the money at the minute, and they've got the printing press to pay their enforcers. So that's where we're at. We have to get in there, switch the power off, and switch the printing press off. I can't guarantee that this is going to work, but it comes back to that quote: if you try, you might not succeed, but if you don't try, you're guaranteed to fail. And that to me is the sort of overriding thing with this. We have to try for the sake of our children, for the sake of the society we grew up in, and the society that we want to pass on to children, grandchildren, whatever. We have to try and first protect it and then push back and create something better. Because one of the things for me is I thought life was okay, sort of 2015, 2019, whatever. But actually, you realise it wasn't really. That was a fake environment. It just hadn't gone to its natural conclusion at that point. And that's So now the determination is when we beat them on their agenda, we have to put in place an agenda that is different. And we need help with articulating that. We know what it sort of looks like, but how we get from here, a state-controlled society, to an organic, voluntary, locally run society. Nobody wants anything controlled and any one person controlling any other person. How we get from there to there is something that we probably will need help with. But there's lots of ideas, and there's lots of initiatives such as are going on here in Bakewell and across the country. People are putting their minds to what this better society looks like. We'll put our minds and our efforts into trying to switch up the old system. So hopefully that gives you a bit of introduction about Freedom Alliance. We need candidates, we need members, and we need campaigners, and we need you to help us. Thank you.
Okay, before we open to the floor and anyone's observations, opinions, questions, I just wanted to mention about the budget today that there was no mention whatsoever when we were told about essentially we're entering into a recession and everyone's got to tighten their belts again and there's austerity. There was no mention of the £311 billion which was spent on the whole COVID thing. 13 billion on PPE, 37 billion on track and trace, furlough cost 70 billion, 103 billion in business loans and grants. Government debt is now 400 billion. And the other really disturbing thing, which I was put right towards the end of the budget speech, I used to be in taxation, I haven't actually listened to it for many years, but there was an announcement about the importance of infrastructure and how 114 billion would be spent in 2023 on infrastructure, basically 5G, HS2, and that the plan is that Britain will become the new Silicon Valley, a leader in AI, robotics, quantum technology. They're going to put Sir Patrick Vallance in charge of a study of how they can open up this whole new era of digital everything, and that we're going to be the world leader. Now, if you have been following the World Economic Forum and the Fourth Industrial Revolution and the writings by Klaus Schwab and everything that's happening with people like Elon Musk, this is very concerning, and everything digital, because it's going to be pushed through on the basis we're the world leader in digital everything. But what that actually means in reality, as soon as the 5G network has got enough coverage, it means they can move to an Internet of Things, driverless cars, bots and drones and policing through AI. And I've been in that world of AI on a consultancy basis. These things aren't in the future, they already exist right here and right now. So this is a very real future possibility of a society which is completely controlled. The currency is all digital, everything is digitally, facial recognition, smart data, and it is a very real possibility under that future that if you don't comply, you get switched off. And I mean, I'm sure the Cressbrook people are going to raise points about stuff like planning, but if anyone does live near Monsall Head and notice the line of telegraph poles suddenly appearing on the most photographed hill in the Peak, probably the whole of the Peak District, a line of telegraph masts put in by Openreach to take digital broadband. So, and if you Stanton, Beverson Stanton, a huge mobile mast on Stanton Moor, it's one of the most outstanding, beautiful places. Yeah, so this 5G, and the thing is, the government
on 2 poles it went up.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I found out when I moved into my house, it has a smart meter on the outside, which I didn't know, because it's social housing. They didn't tell me.
Yeah.
And I've been ill ever since I moved in.
Yeah.
And I'm getting worse. Now, I didn't know I would end up with an EMF sensitivity. It's just one of those things. Genetically, it's happened. Shit happens. But they put them up yesterday, and they didn't tell us. I found out through someone I know who found out for me, and they just went up the poles and they did it.
Yeah,
and now I feel awful.
yeah,
And my switching off will be suicide, because it's all I've got left. I can't get out. That's what they're doing to us. They're killing us. Sorry, but it's too late.
well, I never believe it's too late for anything, so you're in the
You're
right
going to have
place.
a new house somewhere where they don't have it.
Well,
Because I can't get out.
I'm sure in this room there is support for you, and you know, this is where we are being collectively led to the edge, and I know a lot of people have gone over the edge over the past 2 years, and you know that's why it is important that we come together and support one another, and that is one of the amazing things about the liberation movement. Is that there is a stand in the park in most cities at 10 a.m. on Sunday. You always find people to talk to and to support, and so that's why initiatives like this, where we start to unplug and we are aware of what's happening. Because this is the point, is that when that diktat has come through from Klaus Schwab, the fourth industrial revolution, 5G is essential for it. That government diktat, which goes down to all of the authorities, that anything connected with that just gets authority to happen without anyone having, as you found, any say in it, and it's happening all over, everywhere. So thank you for raising that. And yeah,
Well, sorry to be so pessimistic. The vast majority of people on my street are thrilled it's there. They're so excited because of what it's going to do. They connect through social media, digital media. They have little cameras. They have little lights. They're thrilled to bits because it's going to make their life so wonderful.
unfortunately,
And they
this
don't know the
yeah.
other side of it. That's the problem, because they're trapped. They're not finding out. And if I stand up and tell them, eggs on the window? No, I'm not going down that road again.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm alone on that street. They think it's Christmas, literally.
Has anyone? What was your name?
Andrew.
Has anyone got anything, any support or suggestions or help for Andrew? I don't know.
Can I just say, I work with UK Citizen. If you contact us through UK Citizen, I was on a Zoom call with a guy called Ian Jarvis, and he's challenging all of the 5G masts, both using the planning laws, both to stop them going up in the first place and bringing them down. Now, I've got so much on, I'm not involved with that, but I can probably put you in touch with the right people who can help you challenge it through the planning legislation and get it down. So if you go onto our website, well, Jonathan, I know Jonathan as well, so it's ukcitizen.org, and then if you join us, and I can see, and my name's Suzanne,
Right.
and I can point you in the right direction.
Okay, thank you.
Is that right?
I was going to say, there are lots of things I will come and talk to you afterwards that you can do to protect yourself from the EMF. I've done it myself.
Can you do it on the smart meter, because that's really messed me up.
In my kitchen I've got two, and I've completely covered them in aluminium,
Great.
special thick stuff.
Thank you.
You can buy. It's about £5 or £6, but you can do it, and it will help.
Thank you.
Could I just say that I'm part of a group in Wordsworth who are collaborating with an organisation which is based in California, the USA, and also with a number of people in the UK. It is possible for communities to get the councils to take those masks down because they're being put up illegally in many cases. The radiation levels are 30 times higher than what is regarded as being an extreme hazard. And they're being put up very quietly, without the permission of local communities. Those same local communities can get up and actually fight it through the courts if necessary, but they can certainly make representation to councils who are acting illegally. And that's not, it's not well recognised that that's so.
Thanks.
Is there somewhere we can go to get more information about what you've just explained?
I'm sorry, beg your pardon?
Is there somewhere that we can go, some website?
Certainly.
You know, can we know what the website is so we know how to challenge it?
Are you in touch with Rachel through communications, telegram or what have you? Because I can send details. It will be easier for me to send. I don't know whether this is okay, Rachel, to do this.
Yeah.
But would it be possible rather than give details to each individual here? There were a number of people who were applauding, so I assume you roughly agree with what I'm saying.
I would say so.
I can certainly give my details, but it's very difficult to do it en bloc like this. I'm very happy to give you my details, certainly. I will sit, do you mind if I see you afterwards?
Of course, God,
Yeah.
please do.
Yeah. And anybody else for that matter. Sorry, I don't mean to take this
What's
meeting.
what's your name?
Carry on.
Peter.
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 It is a public debate, so you're welcome to speak.
Well, this is valuable information, extremely valuable.
Tony, it's not really running it. Within the next week or two, there will be a website which is called Britons for a Clean Atmosphere.uk.
Right.
It's embryonic at the moment, but in the next few weeks, you will get details on that. That probably is. My wife was just sort of reminding me on that.
All right.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Over to you.
Would anyone else like to speak?
Rachel, there is someone in one of the standing departments that actually gets rid of the smart meters for people. There is very adamant. So I'll try and get the details of that.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, so on the smart meter front, I think you know a bit about smart meters and someone taking their meter out and being having
I know of such people. Yes.
having
But I wouldn't recommend it.
You wouldn't know.
I wouldn't recommend it. Not at this stage.
Because you know,
Does the Freedom Alliance believe in the nation state?
I believe, well, ultimately it would believe in the people deciding whether, so it would believe in the people deciding through referendum whether they wanted to remain part of the nation state. I see it as, personally, and this is not necessarily through the Alliance line, because we're not like other parties, we don't always have a strict party line. I see it as an ever smaller state, and I would like to see it as ever more localised states, communities, if you want. So I personally, I would see independence for Yorkshire and then below that. And I don't think you need top-down government, but I don't think you're going to get from here, where we've got top-down progressive government, to the world we all want overnight. I think it has going to have to be a stage dismantling.
World Economic Forum, government are like almost irrelevant.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And the whole idea is global to local. So, like you were rightly saying, the councils are getting their directives straight from
they're bypassing. Yeah,
so it doesn't need, like Peter said, it's challenging the councils locally. It's the only way you can have any effect, because there's no way we can stop the banks doing this. Well, he says it's the way, isn't it? So, even though there are many avenues of attack, if you like, or many ways, and I haven't got the solutions, in a way, you're applying for a job that doesn't really exist.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Turkey's voting for Christmas. Yeah, I don't have any problem with that.
So the thing is, though, for you to say do it locally, you're quite correct. What is your, so you don't want to be in Parliament, really. You want to be a council.
I don't want to be anything, if I'm absolutely honest. If people in party keep telling me to stop saying that, you must not say you don't want to get elected and all that sort of stuff. And sometimes I go along with what they say, sometimes I don't. But the honest truth is, no, I don't want to be anything. I want to use this vehicle to close down the old system, or be part of closing down, or one option for closing down the old system, and then I want a new organic system to come up from the bottom. And I don't think you need somebody telling you what that system's going to look like. I think it will emerge by itself. It doesn't need this. We'll write these regulations, and you can run your little cooperative according to these regulations. These cooperatives, whatever they are, will emerge and will work once you've got the oppression at the top out of the way. But the trouble is, the bulk of society, and as I've said, potentially all of society is dependent on the oppressor. So we've got to switch off that dependency first. That makes some sort of sense.
Could I just quickly, just to say, we are filming this, and if anyone does
want to be on the bill, we will edit you out. So please just mention. I forgot to mention that earlier. Sorry, did you want to?
Yeah, this is the first I know about you. My husband told me about you at the park events, and I'm very interested in what you're saying, and I agree largely with what you're saying, that nobody wants to be controlled by anybody, and we can all see this stealth of AI and digitalisation taking over. But it is a double-edged sword, because we're all talking about communicating via email to spread the word and etc. So we do need it to a certain level, and I understand what you're saying is that we need to be able to control that locally and govern locally and inform locally and communicate locally, but we will still have to deal in an international arena. If the country as a whole is still going to have to deal with other countries, we can't just say we're all going to deal with our own things that we want to do, we're going to create great communities, which I'm all for, don't get me wrong, but we do need to be able to deal with other countries. Or do you think not?
Well, a lot less would be my argument. I think we've created too many problems for ourselves by meddling in other countries that are no business of ours. I think
No, I'm not talking about meddling, I'm talking about trade and
yes.
survival.
Well, yes, I think there's too.
Commodities.
Personally, I think there's too much international trade.
Yeah, I think there's too much.
But I'm not saying there should be any. I think you have good bilateral relations with the countries that are nearby, Scandinavia, Northern Europe, but I don't really think you have to take it. This whole people chasing after the G20 or 25 or whatever it is. I don't think we need to be involved in parts of the world that are very far flung and not that relevant to us. And I think the dependency on other parts of the world to manufacture things cheaper for us has got to go.
No,
we've got to start making their own stuff. Yeah.
But it is a massive leap.
It is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Come in, and I do agree with what you're saying largely, but it is a massive leap to say that we can go from the system that's been here for centuries, increasingly bad for us, a bad way of life, which I totally agree with. Moving away from nature, more robots, this crap. But it's. I don't think it's as clear cut as I think you're saying. If you don't mind me saying.
No, absolutely. No problem with that.
Your intention, I'm sure. I agree with your intentions, but it's a big thing.
Yeah, it is.
I know we've got to start somewhere, but you are talking very, very locally and not internationally or nationally.
I mean, we're turning an oil tank around very slowly. It is. I think it is a gradualist approach. I think the state will have to be dismantled one brick at a time. I think it may collapse through hyperinflation, and what comes out the other side of that, you get the full societal collapse on the back of that. I personally dread to think, actually. But I think we've got to try and literally dismantle it one brick at a time, turn the super tank around, whichever analogy you like. But it's utterly daunting. We've had a system of increased globalisation for centuries, if not millennia, and the idea of actually going to not do that and do it slightly differently is. I mean, we're not Luddites, we're not anti-technology. We built our networks through. It's the way technology is used to control people. That's I mean, that's where the risk is.
Absolutely, and we see it now, so it's only going to get worse. But you're talking locally, I think that's great. I think maybe a bit more. If you're going to get more people on board, maybe a bit more thought about, apart from just dealing locally, how that's going to expand.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing, and then we'll come to you or whoever else wants to speak. But I was just listening to, I think it's Teresa Coffey talking about food scarcity. She was asked this morning in Parliament about that because it's a very real issue, and this dependence on other countries and international trade. So that's why gas and electricity prices have increased by 8-fold. It was discussed today before the budget came through. So this, what is being done to bring that back home so that we are self-sufficient and we're not dependent on, wheat from Ukraine.
Self-sufficient when we produce coal? I don't know enough about that, but I would suggest that we've probably never been self-sufficient in energy.
Well, I think what I would say is there's probably too much dependence on international trade.
I agree.
So we are at the mercy. So basically, we are at the mercy of the.
But then we all like avocados and our lemons and it's not, all I'm saying is it's not as clear cut as I think the message you're giving that I'm hearing,
Yeah.
and it's tricky.
So, lady here?
Yes, I'd like to ask you, Rachel, about your views on the links. You bought a group-funded purchase of some land at Cressbrook Dale recently, and I think it's probably connected with your views to do with the Freedom Alliance and what's happening in the world, and may even be connected to your views on the likelihood of food scarcity. Can you tell me why Cressbrook Dale, when that's a special nature site, and there's the wild garlic there, there's butterflies, there's flowers, it's not really a suitable place. It's very thin soil, not really suitable for food production, and it seems to be a crime when you've got such a beautiful area that local people have enjoyed, to suggest growing food there. If you believe there is going to be a food scarcity, and there may well be, why not pick some land that's better agricultural land, and potentially somewhere where you could have had a farm building for your group of followers to stay in, because there isn't planning permission for Cressbrook Dale, and it's not really something that a lot of people are wanting locally, to have tents in the woods and toilet tents, and people try. It's an area of peace and tranquility for everyone, and I know you feel that you don't. Everybody should be able to have their own rights respected, but what when your rights or your group rights impinge upon the rights of the local people and what they feel their needs are? So how does this all link together, and why Cressbrook Dale?
It's a very good question, and it's one that we asked ourselves, because Cressbrook Dale was not up for sale, and it came to us kind of magically, actually thanks to Bev here, through Stand in the Park, and we were offered the opportunity to acquire this land, and I'd never heard of Cressbrook before. It wasn't, and it certainly wasn't advertised. And I did actually an event like this, and Adrian Thornhill of Stanton Estate happened to be in the audience. I spoke up at Stanton, and he basically said, "We've got the 73 acres of land. Are you interested?"
Why could you
I'm going to answer your question. I'm going to answer your question because it's an important question, and it requires an insightful answer, which hopefully will make sense if you allow me to complete. So when we went to walk Cressbrook Dale, and in fact actually I went with Dean, we were just blown away. In the same way that you love that land, we were like, wow, this is the most amazing, magical, incredible piece of land. Because Dean is a farmer, but actually I am far more of a shaman. And I could see the power and the magic of that land. And we had to completely, say, we had this thought to buy a farm, but wow, we've been offered this opportunity. And so we started to really tune into the land. And the reason why there are tents on that land is not recreational, it's because we wanted to sleep on the land and journey with the land, to communicate with the land. And so we did that deep work, and I've done a lot of energy work in Peru with shamans, and it was a very interesting, we did a sound healing, and during that sound healing, Jerusalem was sung, and in that moment I realised why we had manifested Cressbrook Dale, because Cressbrook is a mill village. It was the first industrial revolution, and it is one of the dark satanic mills of the Jerusalem, the William Blake lyrics to the Jerusalem. And in that moment I realised that's why, because Cressbrook is a microcosm of what is happening across the whole planet. Imagine living in a mill village. You're completely beholden to the mill owner. You comply, otherwise you lose your job, you lose your home, you lose your livelihood, you lose your food. And I would imagine that in Cressbrook, when Richard Arkwright rocked up there in 1779, and in those days there was no planning. If you had money and you owned land, you did what the hell you liked. I imagine, and his mill was burnt down in 1785, I imagine that whoever were the locals at that time, the farmers and the woodmen, I would imagine there was an identical backlash. So what we are experiencing at Cressbrook is an echo, and it's a microcosm of what's happening on the macrocosm. And it's a very interesting scenario. So when we arrived at Cressbrook, we held out the hand of like wanting to become friends, and there's a lot of conflict, and we recognise we're dealing with very deep primal fear and rage, and it's challenging. And I would absolutely love to find a way that we can somehow find some unity in the conflict, because we are peace-loving people. We're nature-loving people. We don't want to be at war, and we would love to find a way through that. So I'd love to have that conversation, and that was what we tried in the very beginning.
I think it is true, and we obviously love nature, but wouldn't it have been better if that land, if money could have been raised for it to be bought by a wildlife trust for everybody, and keep
we question that because Adrian did offer it. He did offer it to the locals, and who didn't want to. Well, I can only go by what Adrian has told me. But anyway, well,
we're getting off the point, aren't we, about the political thing.
But I guess it is a microcosm of the macrocosm, because essentially you see us as the World Economic Forum who come in with money, who grab power and do what the hell we want.
Well, it's
a microcosm of the macrocosm. It's like because actually we're not your enemy. There's a
because you're identifying it with Arkwright, basically.
No, I'm not identifying with anybody.
There's a far bigger enemy. There's a far bigger enemy than us.
I can get what you're saying.
That's history.
There's a far bigger enemy than us out there. There's a far bigger enemy than us.
That may be true, may or may not be true, but the point is that land, if it is used for food production, won't be very productive because it's thin soil. Most of it's forested, as you know, and the remaining part, I mean, a lot of it's right to roam land anyway that people can go on. It's not suitable for farming and planting gooseberry bushes or blackcurrant bushes or.
But I tell you what it is suitable for: planetary healing.
It's suitable for healing, but how do people know that you're not going to dig up the soil and spoil its natural beauty, because the flora and fauna now is absolutely beautiful.
Why not listen and have the conversation with us? Because we've tried. I've tried. We've tried. Okay. So.
This is just going to go around in circles, though, isn't it? Let's face it. You've got a beef with Rachel. You could be here all night arguing these points. Yeah. Can you just do that at a different time?
We're happy to meet with you. Let's meet and let's have a meeting. Let's have an honest heart-to-heart meeting and actually sit and just try to actually talk at last. That would be so lovely. And thank you for coming. And I did bring the rock from Cressbrook. It is here, along with the rock from Lindisfarne, as well as the rose quartz, because the earth, this is Mother Earth, and we are all about reconnecting to Earth and Mother Earth and all of the teachings. And we truly want healing. We truly would love to find a way through this.
I don't question that, and I can tell that you love nature. It's just that if that dale is dug up or changed or cultivated, it will lose its uniqueness.
And so let's have that discussion, because it's not our intention to harm the dale. We love the dale. We love it just as much as you do. Even though we're newcomers, we absolutely love it. It's magical there. It's magical there. Sorry?
Why do you dig it up then?
Why did we dig it up?
You build a car park on there and you just dig up the land.
Oh, there was a swamp of fly-infested silage. Oh, you see this propaganda, this is the thing. It's like, let's get to the truth. the truth. It's not our intention to cause any harm, injury or loss to our fellow man or woman. Truly.
Can I ask a question on that basis? You posted a tweet about Chris Whitty being hanged. That is not peace and love.
Well, that was actually, I made a mistake with that tweet because I didn't put hashtag Nuremberg. Because after World War II, there were Nuremberg trials and there was a code, the Nuremberg Code, which set out very specifically, because of the experiments that were done by Joseph Mengele, I think his name was, who was a Nazi who experimented with injections and all sorts of experimental medical treatments on people without their full consent. So there has been a lot within the freedom movement about speaking out, because so many people have availed themselves of experimental injections without fully informed consent. There is massive excess deaths. The hospitals are burgeoning with people who are coming in with heart attacks, blood clots. And so when Chris Whitty, as a mother of 5, when Chris Whitty overrode there was a council, the Joint Vaccination Council, JCVI, when they recommended that it shouldn't be given to school children, and he overruled that, as a mother of 5, knowing what I knew about the MHRA, the yellow card system, and the amount and the minuscule risk of the whole COVID thing to children, that's why I did that tweet. And I do believe that there are a lot of officials who are culpable for a lot of crimes as a result of the last 2 years.
During April-May 2020, there were 30 to 40,000 excess deaths in care homes, which have not been adequately explained. We are now looking, go on ONS, I was on there late last night, we're now looking each week this year, it goes back about 35, 40 weeks, with 1 or 2 small exceptions, excess deaths of 1,300, 1,500, 2,000, 3,000, 800. You go down in every week, there are excess deaths of, and that equates to about 15 to 20%. We're looking this year at 100,000 excess deaths that are unexplained. And that's criminal, and it's criminal because it's on the back of a medication program that was never ever properly tested.
You deny that COVID actually existed?
I believe.
You deny that COVID?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Yeah,
Well, you have every right to say that, but COVID is only ever identified by completely flawed PCR tests. So we don't know who died from it, because that's, if you test positive with a PCR test, you can test whether any reintroduction is far more on this than me.
Flu somehow disappeared that year. Oh, it's come back this year supposedly. But also they were sending supposedly COVID positive people home to care homes, and people were dying in those care homes because perhaps they've got a cold or flu or whatever. They've got something that they were allowing people to go back to care homes with.
Overdose from industrial.
Yeah. Well, and that was why the Daslam and Well, you need to do a bit more research. Honestly.
Yeah, well, we started with
and that's just didn't need to have happened in those care homes because of the people being sent home from hospitals.
because of a virus.
No, because so why didn't they do strict quarantine? Why didn't they do strict quarantine? Ridiculous, insane. Well, you're not even listening. They didn't do proper strict quarantine.
Yeah, should we take a question from across there? Yeah.
Well, Kelly Willis, the inventor of PCR, and you can see him on many videos, said it should not be used for diagnosis.
Yeah.
Quite definite. Only equivocal. It's only used for laboratory examinations. So that's quite definite. And that's the manner
yeah, absolutely, yeah. We'll take the question from the back.
Just an observation about the debate. There's obviously a debate about COVID, and you've got a view very clearly, passionately have a view. I think it's worth noting that that flies in the face of absolutely overwhelming medical consensus.
So paid for by Govern-Ment against that.
I understand, but I think it's worth observing that those views.
Only the evidence that you've seen, but you've only seen what you wanted to see.
I'm sorry, I'm not talking about the evidence that I've seen. I'm talking about an overwhelming consensus.
What a consensus.
Consensus by who? Whose consensus?
Medical scientific community.
But you're allowed. What you see.
But it's not only that. It's not only that. It's proper infection.
We're in freedom of speech party. You have the right to say
You've broadly in support, I think, of the comments that were made in defence of Rachel's tweet. Is Freedom Alliance broadly, and can we assume Freedom Alliance is broadly in support of the death penalty?
Well, personally, I'm not in support of the death penalty, and can I just finish? I've not seen that tweet.
A tweet that says Chris Whitty will hang sounds and mentioned Nuremberg.
I've never seen that tweet. I personally.
I think Rachel said will hang when he was doing sexual perversion thing with an orange in his mouth. I think she was referring to that, not that we would hang him.
Yeah. Can I answer the question? Yeah. I personally don't support the death penalty. I actually don't support having a big tribunal to, sort of war crimes tribunal. I think we've got adequate criminal law. I think basic criminal offences took place during 2020 and are still taking place, and existing criminal law is all we need to sort that out.
Doesn't your manifesto call for some kind of
it is a working document, the manifesto, and I'm expressing my personal view, not the party view, but my view is that we can resolve. It may not be Rachel's view, I don't know if it's discussed with Rachel, I don't know. We've got the tools to resolve this, but there was gross criminality took place in 2020, I think, and that, and on the corruption financial front as well, and people need to be held accountable for that, is my view.
They actually know that positive placebos work as well. So why have we had daily fear messages and other stressors? And also, if people were infective, why haven't we had proper strict quarantine in hospitals instead of one person I know of? He got respiratory problems, his wife was non-COVID, and she was put in a ward that he had to walk through a COVID ward through, no quarantine or anything within that ward, and so a very vulnerable person walking through that ward, and they were doing that, and they weren't doing strict quarantine. So if it really was as infectious as it supposedly is, they should have had strict quarantine. I can remember that happening in hospitals when I was a child, and also they would not be sending out positive positive COVID tested people to care homes where you've got more vulnerable people that are actually more vulnerable because of the fear, the stress, the social isolation that's been happening. And all of that is making people much more vulnerable. And then they bring in these injections and the flu jab, making people even more vulnerable.
But look at Johnson with his parties.
Yeah.
Were they bothered about this highly infectious disease? Were they? They knew it didn't exist.
Right.
Yes.
Just want to say I don't disagree with a lot of what's been said tonight because we're all thinking from the same page and we're on exactly the same page. But this is not going to help the Freedom Party get where they want to go because it's just going to we need to be honing on what we want at the end of the day, not everything what's happening.
I agree with you. I was answering questions that were asked. I wasn't, I didn't say, let's chase Chris Whitty down as part of my speech. I was where we go with the future. As a party, we often have a debate about, you know, should we do the things the other parties do, which is tell people what they want to hear, or should we just say our truths, however uncomfortable it is? And we go for the truth option. We are not in the business of chasing votes. We will say what we think is happening, and would like people to agree with us to vote for us. But yes, I totally agree. We've got to move forward, not backwards, and not keep focusing backwards. I absolutely agree with that. But I was just answering it. Somebody asked me, do I support the death penalty? Question, I've got to answer it, haven't I? Yeah.
Are you going to do a lot of meetings like this in the future?
We do, I am doing, yeah.
One of the things that might be necessary is a venting period of maybe 5 or 10 minutes so that people can do what we've just done.
Yeah.
Because some of us haven't spoken to anyone for 2 years.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of shit going on. It's in our heads, we want to spill it out, vent it. That might actually be a quite useful thing to allow so that people can then say, okay, that's enough, we've done it, we've shouted and screamed and thrown our toys out of the cot, let's move on. We've just done that, and I think that actually is quite healthy. You know, I said my piece, you said your piece, people have maybe said their bits and bobs. If you give us the permission to have a moan and get it off our chest, that might mean the meeting goes a bit better later on. You know, normally people repress and try to say the right thing and try to fit in. Why don't we just admit that as humans, sometimes we just need to scream a little bit and let it out and have that, okay, you've got your 10-minute, it's like 1984, the 2-minute hate thing or whatever, you know, and then move on. Because I feel a bit better for it.
These so-called experts are not really experts at all, and there's too much groupthink. So all power to your. I've voted Conservative all my life, but there are things that are not right in our society at the moment, and I don't think it's the fault, as I said to this gentleman at the beginning of the meeting. I don't think it's the fault of the British people. Essentially, yes, there are ne'er-do-wells, but most of us try and behave ourselves and stick within the law. I accept what the lady there said about common law. I'm proud of my Anglo-Saxon heritage, and that's where our common law came from. And it's kind of been subsumed in a way. I don't know, since the conquest maybe, but we used to have things called hundreds, small councils in each little part of the country, presumably meaning 100 acres, and there were representatives of that 100 acres who set out the law. And the point about the jury system is absolutely correct, and we've forgotten about that, so I think you're right to bring that.
Absolutely right.
I concur with all those things that you've said. I don't believe in bringing back the death penalty, and I think it's barbaric. But we all have different opinions. I worry about we're a relatively small island, and at the moment we have 64 million people, maybe more, and getting larger by the day. And I just wonder, talking about self-sufficiency, how much land you want to be taken up. I mean, hereabouts in Derbyshire and on the hills, there's not much chance of good land being arable land. So you're not going to get much out of that, really. But it's how much you want to have industry, and how much it's got to go back to the local people. We must have our say, I think.
Can I just say that you don't actually need the land to grow the food in. You can actually put raised beds there. We don't need to use the soil. We can put raised beds there, and we can plant apple trees, plum trees. There are lots of places we can do this. Loads of places. Nursing home grounds, places like this, church grounds. We don't need to have a huge field to grow food in. We've already got these little areas we can use. We just need a little bit of ingenuity and organisation. We could all produce our own food.
Where are you going to grow food when they've made growing your own food illegal? They're all
illegal.
Making farming illegal.
Yes,
they make growing your own food in your own land
can I just answer?
illegal.
You've asked me a question, please let me answer. Illegal doesn't mean unlawful. We have two types of, if you like, law. One is legislation and the other one is common law. Legislation is not lawful, and you have to consent to make it lawful. So we ignore legislation.
Right, that's good in theory. Try it in practice. You know when you've got our police
Yes, I agree with you entirely. But isn't that why we're here?
Yes.
You know, so that we can protect ourselves against these.
How are you going to protect yourself?
Well, I think the thing is with the system is gripping in, and it wants to grip in even tighter, and they're not going to release that. And I, encouraged by Dean, stood up for a parking fine and went to court and said, I require a trial by jury, and of course I was just completely ignored. And, you know, so they're not going to make it easy for us, but it is a pattern interrupt, because if enough people say, I require a trial by jury, because the reason why they took common law trial by jury away, looking into equity law, is because so many were complaining to the king that the common law was too easily corrupted, and that's how the whole of the chancery and that was created by the king in the 15th century. I know all this because Dean sends me all these videos every night I'm not with him. Watch this video, watch this video. And that's how it happened. And so who was complaining to the king? It wasn't the common people, it would have been the dukes and the lords who weren't getting their way because the people were too powerful. So this people power, we don't have to be helpless victims, but it is about coming together, and we're not going to agree on everything, but if we can at least get a consensus of opinion, a consensus of like, we've all got slightly different opinions on different things, but
Absolutely.
we're more powerful if we come together and we unite, because we are not the enemy, and the divide and conquer program is very, very strongly embedded in us, that we've got to, divide and conquer, divide and rule. It's about transcending that. I really believe that.
I totally agree with you, 100%. And it's been a surprise, some of the things that you've said tonight to me. So before we get involved, as interested parties in what we think, where we would be, although I could bring up how we get to where we need to be, the word can be spoken, isn't it? I think that's what you were talking about, people standing up and people supporting. So you're leafleting. We need the word to get out more, so that more people don't read things, they're embarking on that's like a conspiracy theory. Because a lot of people will do that. So first of all, you need to get your message out, don't you? To me, I think people to make this change.
It's more about joining the dots. We find that with Stand in the Park is that it's people believe these things, but they think they're all alone, and then there's like, oh, there's someone else, and there's someone else, and then more people are waking up because. And unfortunately, we know this from our Stand in the Park, a lot of people are waking up because their wives just had a blood clot after the jab, or their mums fell down dead like within days of the jab. So people are unfortunately waking up through personal tragedy, but I think that groups like this, movements like this, all of these initiatives, it's connecting the dots, because there's so many people who are aware at some level of awakening to what's going on, and together we can help, and I've learned things tonight, we can inform one another and grow and connect. And it doesn't have to be a million people in a stadium. It's small groups like this that are the pattern interrupt, that, and this video will go out and people will watch it bit by bit. Chipping away. And we can go a long way. Anyone else wanted to Russell, do you want to say
I think
something?
I've said enough, haven't I?
You're always saying too much, actually.
That's why we need more councillors to keep candidates forward. The more people we've got and representing the Freedom Alliance, getting that message out, and the more, because we're not on mainstream, but at least when elections happen, they have to do a little bit on mainstream. And even if it's just on that ballot paper, as Freedom Alliance and any other wording that you choose, at least it's dropping the seed.
People don't know about Freedom Alliance in the first place.
Well, no, but
That's
even
what I'm
if
saying.
it's
It needs
only,
to get out.
even
more.
if it only gets to them on that election ballot paper, at least it's got to them on that.
Well, that it is, if they can then go somewhere in the manifesto. But if that's not ready.
But again, that does happen. I mean, you see from our website visits, whenever there's even a little by-election or anything going on, the website visits go up by 10, 20-fold. And people have just actually literally been using the ballot papers advertising. They say, oh, I've not heard of that. And go
You need a
Google
big
it.
profile.
Well, we're not going to get them. We're not going to get the profile because the mainstream media won't touch it. I mean, BBC broke an election law with us by refusing to give us what we're legally entitled to in the North Shropshire by-election. So, you know, it's not because we're not trying, it's because they are deliberately refusing to give us any coverage at all.
What about GBTV? Have you?
No, the same. I was
Nothing
saying
with that at all.
we have made endless attempts, both directly and indirectly, to contact the GBTV, and they won't touch us either. The Light newspaper and one or two, which Alan will definitely interview us with.
Will they give you a reason why they won't?
They just ignore it.
It's finances, GBTV. You never even know who finances.
I've seen their experience.
Either NCOA of Nestle and...
So we are going to have to do this at street level with the leaflets that I've got here, and that's why there isn't a saviour, it's all of us. We're all going to have to go back into our villages, our areas of the town, and put leaflets with letterboxes and stand for councillors and use whatever opportunity we get to get the message out there. That's how we're going to do this, one street at a time. We're not going to get someone the BBC do a half-hour feature on us or something. It's never going to happen.
Okay, it's 8:25, and we'll probably do another few questions, and then do we feel complete? The gentleman at the back.
Hi, Megan. It's another question about Freedom Alliance, and you've talked about your wanting to get the word out and wanting to create a buzz around your website. Your website's got more than one reference to globalist parasites, is the phrase. And I wonder about that because that feels like code for Jewish people. And it's understood.
I'm happy to send feedback, actually.
So the question is, my question is, are you aware of that? Is that something that concerns you? Is that something you think?
Well, we can just answer that. We're not into discrimination at any level at all. Unlike some of the other freedom parties that I mentioned earlier, we're totally non-discriminatory. Inclusive for me has been a word that's been captured by the woke brigade, and that's unfortunate because I regard myself as absolutely inclusive. The background to that phrasing, I mean, when you go back to sort of beginning 2021 and stuff, people were talking about the elites, the globalist elites, and we had a discussion in the party. We said, they're not elite. There's nothing elite about them. We've got to stop calling them elites. And we did stop calling them elites. And for a while, and some of the website stuff is a little bit out of date, etc. For a while, we did use the phrase globalist parasites because that's what people think they are. I'm tending to use Davos gangsters and think, just the World Economic Forum now. Those are the sort of codes I use. But there's absolutely no intention of anything anti-Semitic in that phrase at all. But that's the first time I've ever heard anybody say that.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, they are parasitical and they're globalists, so go on into me, really.
I understand that framing, I understand that point of view. It's just that, somebody talked to me about it who was Jewish and said, I'm frightened.
Right, okay, well, I would like, Well, if that's...
I'm surprised you've not heard it, because it's a very, very common trope.
It's called Semitic brainwashing, which you haven't been subjected to. I do apologise for being personally directed at that person.
Sorry?
It's called Semitic brainwashing that you've been subjected to. I'm sorry to be personal.
No, that's okay. So by Semitic brainwashing you mean...
You see it that way because of the invention of the word Semitic and anti-Semitic. So people will see it that way, part of brainwashing stuff.
But I'd say it's really helpful that you've brought it up because we
And I would
didn't
as
know
well,
that that was a terminology that people associated. So thank you for bringing it up.
My pleasure.
And please, if there's anything else, let us know.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah. Okay, anybody else got any?
Well, I just want to make a point that not all legislation is bad. Back in 1688, William and Mary were reigning in power at the time, and that's William of Orange and Mary of the Netherlands. And they reigned over Parliament, passing an act called the Bill of Rights Act, which is a superior act. Now, the Bill of Rights Act says that nobody, and you can check this, it's on the government website, it's still there, you can check it. The Bill of Rights Act says that nobody can make an obligation for another person. Now, what are these people in Parliament doing? They're passing legislation. They're making obligations for all of us. I just want to make that point. So, of course, that's why we need to consent to any legislation.
Well, we're supposed to elect them all, but when they get to Westminster, they all change.
Yeah.
Their habits, don't they? They get sucked in with all the ego trips and all the rest of it that they get up to down.
But anyway, I'm just making, an unequivocal point. It's not an opinion. This is not my opinion. This is what you can go on the government website and you can find. The Bill of Rights, 1688, says that nobody, and that includes all these so-called MPs, nobody can make an obligation for another person. And what are they doing with the council tax? Where's that obligation come from? Thank you.
Okay, any more questions, or are we complete? Do we feel...
Could I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
I sort of touched earlier on the question about nationhood. And I wonder if the Freedom Alliance believes in controlling its own borders.
Yes, it does. It believes that we should not be meddling in foreign borders, but we should control and defend our own borders. Most definitely. Personally, I mean, if the debate is heading towards immigration, my view on immigration is that there is a sort of great chasm in society on this, and it probably can only be settled through some sort of referendum or something like that. Are we a nation that wants to have net immigration or not? And that would be my way through that particular problem, because there are differing views within our current nation. However you define that, whether that's four nations or one nation.
I'm sure you're aware there's a lot of debate currently about illegal immigration.
Yes, yeah.
And a number of people are very concerned about the way that our nation is shall we say, being challenged by it. Because there doesn't seem to be a narrative as to what we're going to do with these people that are arriving on our shores around 1,000 a day, I believe, at the moment. Obviously this weather that we're getting at the moment is going to slow it down. But that's the only thing that is. There seems to be no efforts whatsoever by the state to control it.
I think even more concerning is that a lot of fit, healthy men are being brought in and put in whole hotels and being paid and actually being brought in by the government and financed, and one has to question what is happening there.
Absolutely.
These are not sort of families and children and wives, they're all fighting age men, and they're all being brought in, and whole hotels are being bought by the government, bought up, and they're being actually...
They've all been signed up by the UN, and that's why I'm being all see. Because come the glorious day of the WEF and everything, once they say it's going to happen, all those illegals that are in the hotels will be out on the streets taking whatever they want. And they will be the new population of this country. If we don't stand up and fight them, then we're gone.
I think it's about being aware of what's going on, because there is a sort of army being amassed.
Absolutely.
And one has to question that when this, and I hate to be a sort of about doom and gloom, but you know, if we do think of the people linking together and actually saying no and standing up and you know, massive non-compliance, that there may well come a point when they can't rely on the people to comply. And if we all stand up and that has happened with the peace rallies, a lot of people, millions of people, may not be on mainstream media, but millions of people going to those rallies, you know, across 2020 and 21. So it is a worry, and we saw what happened in America, where you have blacked out vans arriving with a whole mob of men who are, you know, obviously not part of the police, supporting the state effort to control the people during the whole COVID uprisings in America. We saw that happening. It's very worrying what's happening. I think we need to be very aware. And so, you know, what can I say?
So are you thinking of forming an army then?
Well, see, this is the thing. The people have a huge amount of power, and I think people are waking up. We are waking up to our power, and it's not fight. We're not going to fight the world right. It's peaceful. So it's peaceful non-compliance. That's what it's always been about.
You can't fight a war with peace. We're at war. They're killing people. Instead of using bullets nowadays, they're using injections.
Yeah.
They're killing people.
Yeah.
We're at war. There's no argument, that's it.
Yeah,
And you cannot fight it with religion, with peace, or anything else like that. You've got to stand up and fight.
Well, personally, I don't believe.
And fight.
Personally, I don't believe that we will fight the world right, because millions have died trying for generations. There has to be a different way, and I just know from the world of the kind of shamanic, you know, world of light workers, that there are a lot of people doing a lot of very high vibrational, resonant work to flood the labyrinth with light, because if there is resonance, when there's resonance, there can be no conflict, and it can be collapsed. These are higher dimensional, you know. This is why there's so much dissonance, because they're trying to counteract the amount of resonance and the light coming through.
But you call the depopulation an intended depopulation of 6.5 billion people on this globe. Would you call that war?
Oh, I'm not saying that that's not happening. I'm just saying, what is the solution?
They're sort of wanting us to fight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
But if we don't,
no, but if we do, they'll
6.5 billion will disappear.
But if we do fight, that is what they're wanting us to do, to take us out.
Everything saying no.
Yeah.
Do not
Steve just standing
list.
Words is not going to stop us.
Oh, we keep standing up.
With respect, what
Words and petitions will not
what you're actually suggesting is physical retaliation, which actually is tantamount to war. Look where war has got us in the past. Absolutely nowhere. The only people that benefit from war are the bankers, the finances, etc. Never the people.
Well, that's true. He's not saying that. But they're at war with us. Where they declared war on us. So it's our turn to fight back to them. We can only fight back. We've got the law.
There are ways of fighting, not necessarily physical.
Yeah. And we have to keep getting the message out there about these excess deaths that are happening.
We're not necessarily in control of our own law at the moment. That's why we want to break.
Well, yeah, I know that.
And we're still fighting against people like this. We may have good intentions, but they're not what we have. We want is our law.
Okay, so, well,
it's good that we're having a lively debate, and these are all massive issues, because, you know, we know what the problem is and what is the solution. And, you know, to me, there is tremendous power in truth, in speaking out, in pattern interrupting and creating awareness and joining together and connecting. And the more that we can do that, the better. That's my view. So I think we are pretty complete. Yes?
I don't know how they're going to deal with your people. My sister is at the end of life at the moment. She's 69 years old. She's had all the vaccinations, got diagnosed with dementia, been fallen over a couple of times, basically they took all care off her, apart from the hospital. My brother-in-law couldn't even go and see her the other day because they said, she's got COVID. Nobody can go and see her, she can't help her. How do we get around that? Because that, for most people, is one of the getting into
Yeah, sorry to hear that, Rosie. The NHS at the moment is it's a very tricky one, which is, you know, this whole issue of health and healing is a massive area for us as a society, because, and I know this from, I was asked to speak in the NHS, and actually in the end the executive said it's too dangerous to have her coming to talk to us. But what they said to me is the NHS is in disarray. There are more sicker people than ever, and so many of the staff know it's the elephant in the room with the jabs, that in A&E departments, people coming in, they know what's going on, and, you know, it's a serious situation, and the Midazolam murders, and I personally, I say to my sons, don't deliver me into the NHS if I get ill unless you absolutely, because that's the thing, you go on a pathway, like the Liverpool pathway, and you don't come out. Some people. Well, that's the thing, you see, there's massive financial incentives around all of this, so it's a huge can of worms, and it's something that needs to have light shone on it and people questioning and speaking out. And, you know, everything happens to not allow it to be swept under the carpet. Yeah. 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 I think we have to just have massive compassion, because the level of psyop, the level of propaganda has been just military grade, and so it's quite understandable if you're only consuming mainstream media that you totally believed and went along with this programme, and unfortunately a lot of people have consented to their own death as a result. So it is a serious situation, and
at
we
the moment,
just have to keep speaking
they're
out.
actually testing all people as they go into the Shoe and Forest hospitals, asymptomatic people for COVID, with unreliable tests, and they're also trying to get people to wear masks all the time, and all the staff, and even though those won't stop any infection as such, and actually cause lots of health problems as well. And yeah, it's just unbelievable. And they're talking about trouble with finances, and then they say, but we're still testing everybody, even asymptomatic, and enforcing this face mask wearing.
Okay, I think we'll call it to an end there. You're obviously welcome to continue the conversations. We don't have to, we have to clear up and be out of here by no later than 10 o'clock, so we've got time, a bit more time to mill. So just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who's come. Thank you, Dean, for all your support. Thank you to my sons, Paul, who's been on the video, Michael on the video. Thank you to Elliot and Amy and Kirsty. And a big thanks to Jonathan.
very much, Maggie. Just to say, there are Selection Freedom Alliance leaflets here, which I have no intention of taking home with me, so if you could take some each, please. Thank you.